Welcome to episode 4 of the TFF podcast and our first video cast on YouTube with me, Andrew, from Fantasy Football Hub, your one-stop shop for everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof. Tonight, however, we are here to talk everything Telegraph fantasy football. Luke Wilson is back. Luke, how has the last few weeks treated you?
Slightly better than the previous podcast, but I'm still just treading water.
Okay, and we also have Carl back. Carl, have you had much luck over the last few weeks?
Hi again. I'm basically in the same position as Luke. I've just treaded water in the last few weeks since we met. So I must admit I'm quite happy with the setup itself.
Okay, it sounds like we're all, we all haven't made a lot of progress in the last month. So it'll be interesting now to see how we navigate through all the Christmas fixtures and things. So for this episode, we asked the community what they wanted us to talk about, and the answer was pretty resounding. We had a question off Lee Thompson: what is the best way to deal with a Liverpool blank and the hectic Christmas fixtures? We had a question off Eddie White: most teams have 5 games to Liverpool's 2 after their early match next week. Is it really worth burning 5 or 6 transfers with the rotation that will happen? If I bring in players that are more likely to play, they probably won't make up enough points to be worthwhile. So any suggestions on that? And Richard Brook: how many transfers have we all got left, and what's the ideal number to have left at this stage of the season? I've got a bit nuts with mine and only have 19 left. And then we also had a question in our premium member WhatsApp group off Peter Marshall. His questions were: what are the tactics for dealing with the Liverpool blank? Whether we should jump on the Spurs and Man U bandwagons? What is a reasonable number of transfers to have left at the end of December? And are City assets becoming less attractive? Do we hold our nerve if we have them, or do we double up hoping they'll come good? Or is it time to offload, e.g. ditch Edison for a cheaper option? So some really interesting questions there. And off the back of that, we will spend the majority of this pod video mining through the fixtures, looking at the best transfer opportunities and the best options all through the Christmas period into New Year. And now that we know the FA Cup fixtures, we've got the dates, we can have a look at that as well. So firstly, to answer Richard's question, let's take a look at our team and progress. Carl, would you mind talking us through your team?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think like a lot of teams, over the season, I've tended to move a little bit more towards the Leicester assets because they're very cheap and obviously they're flying at the moment. I expect that they, even though they may not keep the same performance up for the rest of the season, I still expect them to perform very highly compared to what their prices are. So I think I've got Vardy, 2 defenders, and I've already moved out Edison for Schmeichel in goal. So I've got 4 Leicester players at the moment, and I'll probably be knocking that up to 5 in the short term. So I'm quite content there. I think there's a few Chelsea assets that have been flying high and especially good value for the money in Abraham and Mount. So I'm sort of quite content with those 2. And when you start looking at all those players, it seems like you're just a bit of a wash with money. So you can virtually pick whoever you desire.
Yeah.
So in terms of moving forward, both my Liverpool players will be going when after Liverpool play Watford, which is the week before their blank game week. Yeah. In terms of replacements, I'll probably be, as I've mentioned, probably another Leicester defender. I haven't decided who, but could very well be Pereira. And the other one will be moving on to striker. So I'll be going for a 4-3-3 formation. I'm a little bit undecided. There's Rashford, who looks very good at the moment. He's on good hot form. And there's also Jesus for Man City. So I'm sort of like weighing up those 2 options. And I'm also sort of like taking into account the FA Cup. So I'd imagine Leicester will progress. I think Man City, in the longer term, they're going through a rough patch. I expect them to score goals. So I'll be more than happy to get Man City players in. It's Jesus or, with Aguero maybe coming back, and that's where I'm a little bit unsure.
Yeah. Okay. And how's your rank looking, Carl, in your transfers?
Well, my rank's near enough the same as what I was last time we spoke. So after tonight's update, I'm around 15,000, and I think
Okay.
I was 15,000 last time.
Yeah.
In terms of transfers, I'm down to 29 now. So I'm getting ready for the Christmas festivities and burning through them, and enjoy the cups and the carnage which happens in the new year.
Yeah.
I will just point out one other thing that's playing on my mind a little bit. So I know I mentioned last time we spoke about the FA Cup. Also on my mind a little bit is the League Cup final. So I will be, even though I'm not taking that into any account in the short term, it's in my mind about watching out of who's getting to the final, and is that rearranged fixture likely to be before or after that actual League Cup final itself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's normally February, I think, end of
The final's on the 1st
end
of
of
March.
Oh, it's 1st of March, sure. Okay.
But it's just a question of if they rearrange it. Like last season, I got a bit burnt.
Because they rearranged it early, didn't they?
Yeah.
I remember,
so I got rid of all my Man City players, and
Yeah.
then they arranged it before the final, and I had to get them all in again.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Carl. And Luke, what about you?
So team's been all right. I mean, it's quite interesting that I've taken a bit of a scalpel to my team over the last few weeks. I think I talked about that on the last pod. So bringing in Pulisic was one of the main things. Then we got the Tammy injury, so I did a bit of a hokey cokey on Tammy when he was out, and then had to bring him back in again. Brought in Soyuncu, so you'll notice that Dan Burn has left my team, and after tonight, I'm quite glad about that. And Gilbert's also gone as well. So probably the other thing to talk about is looking at Carl's, and I can't remember from yours, but I think you're a big fan of 5 at the back. I'm deliberately trying to shift money forward, and I know I'll come on to talk about that later.
Yeah.
But I was relatively happy with my team setup until it looked so similar to Carl's. It's only about 3 players different. So I'm now thinking, how the hell am I going to catch him? But yeah, I'm quite happy with the setup. Happy with the Leicester guys. I'm toying with the Liverpool move out. I think I will move Mane out. And get a 5. I think it's 5 for 2, isn't it? I'll probably just hold TAA. I think just to keep the transfer. But yeah, one of Mane or TAA will definitely be going out for a little bit.
Okay. And moving on to my team then. So as you guessed, Luke, I'm on 5-3-2. So I'm stuck with Edison. I did put Soyuncu this afternoon for Tomori. I think he'll play because, I think Tomori will come back to the team in the short term because Chelsea were dreadful yesterday. But Rudiger's back in training and he'll be back on the scene soon. So while I had a straight swap, I think one of the golden rules we talked about in the first the podcast we did was if there's an obvious error, just go in and fix it and don't mess around. So I've just swapped out Tomori for Soyuncu. I've got Pereira, Chilwell, Robertson and Alexander-Arnold at the back. I've got Edison in goal, who is a bit of a nightmare, but I just know that if I take him out, they'll start keeping clean sheets. I've got Mane, Pulisic and Tielemans in midfield. Tielemans being a bit of a disappointment. And then Vardy and Abraham at front. So my current rank, I'm about 5,500, so I haven't really moved. I keep going up to 3,000 on like the Saturday and then going back down to 5,000 on the Sunday, and the same happened this weekend. And I'll be looking now, as we look into as we look into the fixtures now, I'll be looking as well for potentially moving out Mane and Robertson. I'm not sure who for yet. There's a lot of really good options, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a bit. But there are our teams, nothing too grand as yet. I'm down to 23 transfers, so it's less than I liked. But I do think this season has been a very odd one, as Carl mentioned, with the cheap Leicester players, cheap Chelsea players. It's been a bit of a strange one. I think we didn't move quickly onto those players. we'd be lagging behind now. Just to answer a couple of the remaining questions then. So how many transfers do we think, I suppose, will be best this season to have by Christmas? Carl, have you got any thoughts on that at the moment?
No, I always think as many as possible. But it depends on your point score. But I'd like over 20 and 25 plus.
Yeah,
would be really good. You can cope with under that, because I remember last year one of my teams, I had quite a few transfers. Very few transfers, so you can cope. So I wouldn't feel too bad if you've made transfers and you haven't got that many left. That's fine. But in a good position, I'd say 20 to 25 plus would be very good.
Okay. And what about yourself, Luke?
I think when we talked about this previously, we were talking about having sort of somewhere between 25 and 30 being a good, a really good position to be in for Christmas. Yeah. I'm just under that on 24, but I think I'm quite happy with my team. The only sort of Dan James has come back into form, so I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah. Pulisic is probably the only concern I've really got, and then obviously the kind of World Club Cup, so I will be using 2. So I think I'm aiming probably for the 1st of January start. I'm probably looking at about 20 that I'll have left is what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, I think I'm about the same. So as I said, I'm on 23, but I really like that Spurs run over Christmas. The kind of greedy streak in me grabs hold. Also, I haven't got any Man City in my team apart from Edison, and not holding Sterling and De Bruyne. They got a key contribution each midweek. They didn't get anything yesterday, but they're so frightening to watch still. And soon they'll turn it on. And it only takes 1 or 2 games for them to win 5 or 6-0. And they're right in the points again.
As an owner of both, I'd probably rather be in your position.
Well, I'm trying to play the fixtures, but I think we got away with it yesterday, and I think United were fantastic, which I'm sure we'll be looking at their assets in a bit. Okay, so moving on then, just a quick look at the stats. For those who haven't seen on Twitter, we now write a weekly article for the Telegraph, which comes out on the Thursday. I'll show the link at the end on the video, and I'll read it out at the end of the podcast. But these are some of the key stats. Just to call them out for our audio listeners. So we're looking at season points and our season's points top scorers. So this doesn't include this weekend's data, but Vardy is right up there. We've then got Mane, then Rashford, Abraham. Aubameyang is still up there. De Bruyne is still up there for his previous exploit, which is why he's so scary. Pereira and Chilwell are still right up there, and I'm talking top point scorers now in the whole game. Sterling, Mahrez and Pukki. So their season points are the highest. Interestingly, if you look at form, the top scoring, there's 6 Leicester players in the top, I think it's 11 here, but Chilwell, Pereira, Soyuncu and Evans, Vardy and Schmeichel. So that back 4 or 5 from Chelsea are just absolutely smashing it. And if we think Evans and Vardy got more points this afternoon, they're just, smashing everything. You've then got Rashford, Mane, Ali, very interestingly, has crept into form. So this is date for the last 6 weeks. Muset, who sadly I think got injured earlier, which is interesting. And Pulisic, even though he hasn't done anything in the last 3 or 4 games, he's still got 38 points prior to that, and he's still in the form chart. So he is right up there. In terms of points per million, we've got 8 defenders in the top 12. Soyuncu, Chilwell, Pereira and Evans are all still up there as well. And then we move into the Sheffield United defenders. I noticed Baldock this afternoon got a goal and an assist. So congratulations to everyone who's got on him early, because he's still nailing it at 2.4 million. Absolutely, really good value. Burns, Stevens, Egan. They've then got Cantwell, McGinn and Lundstrom are still in there from a midfielder's view. And Abraham is the only striker in there. I'm surprised that Vardy's not in there now, actually. He may actually be in there by this afternoon. And then just looking at percentage owned, Sterling is still far and away the highest owned player in the game, which is interesting since he's been off form. followed by Alexander-Arnold, who has a blank after next week, so it'll be interesting what happens there. But Vardy has gone from 15% to 38% in 3 weeks. Harry Kane's still very highly owned, so that's maybe why we didn't see the jumps yesterday, because a lot of players who play the game reasonably seriously probably haven't got Kane, and that's not a slight on the ones who have, but he hasn't been performing very well. You've then got Mount, Chilwell, De Bruyne, Mane, and Abraham, who have been performing well, and Aubameyang is still quite high as well in the highly owned stakes. But the question I've got for you guys here, just looking at these stats, as we can see, Leicester players completely dominate nearly everything here, from season points to form points to points per million. And it's also interesting that only 2 of the top 10 owned players are Leicester players. The question, I think, which could be a season-defining one, really, if we think how many games are going to be played over the next month, is a big chunk of the season. So I personally hold 5 Leicester players. Do we think that Leicester are going to keep going to the end of the season and really keep bringing us points and giving us value? Luke, if I can ask you that first.
I think that the short answer is yes. I think they are just far outperforming where I guess where we would expect them to be, which I guess is sort of somewhere between 5th and 8th, I guess is where we'd expect. But I mean, they are now looking like the most likely team to finish second. Really don't know what's going on with City. I think if you then factor in the kind of relative value of them against the other players, I mean, even if they drop off a bit, they've got so much good value, particularly people like Soyuncu. And I mean, I think no problems loading up. I mean, I think, would you say you're on 5 or 6?
5 now, yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll probably, risk versus reward. I mean, you could go full hog and win the whole thing. Probably there's probably a team up the top with a team of 11 Leicester players. But I think, I mean, certainly I've seen a few teams that are unlocked and visible with the block. The 4 at the back and Schmeichel, and then Vardy, and then either Tielemans or mostly Mount is the one that I've seen. But I think, from my perspective, I think get on board. If you haven't got at least 4 of them, you're not going to go up your mini league. You need that just to stay afloat, I think, these days. So it's really what you're going to do with the other 5 or 6 players, I think, is where we're at now.
Yeah, and I also think it's really interesting looking at the ownership that only 2 of the top 10 owned players are Leicester. So it's not like the ship has sailed. I think that's the big thing for me there. There's only Vardy and Chilwell. So Chilwell's on about 25%. But if you look at all those other players, if you look at Soyuncu, Pereira, Evans, Schmeichel, there's Maddison, Tielemans, even Harvey Barnes, players like this, they're not very highly owned still. So the ship hasn't sailed, which I think is the most interesting thing which stands out for me looking at these stats. How about yourself, Carl? Do you think Leicester can keep it going?
Yes, considering the way they're playing at the moment, and they've had the experience of going through this, a few years ago. So, sometimes you sort of see a team have a lucky streak, but looking at Leicester and their underlying stats, I think they deserve to be where they are, and therefore they're not there by fluke. They're there by merit, and therefore you can expect it to continue. Interestingly, when I was looking at, you sort of touched on it a little bit, but the optimal team if you put at the beginning of the season before this weekend's fixtures, there would be 6 Leicester players, and it's basically the block Leicester defence, 4 defenders and the keeper, and Vardy up front. So even though you've got the other ones that are contributing and could be value for money, they free up so much money, you can just basically pick anybody else you wanted. So when we sort of talked at the beginning of the season about block defence, if you was one of these people to go, I'm going to go block Leicester, you would just be in heaven, because you'd have so much money. The other ones would be Mane, Kevin De Bruyne, Mahrez, Vardy, Rashford and Abraham.
Yeah.
You know, you could virtually put in Kane and swap one of those ones out. You'd have had such a, you know, solid base to start with. If you had that lucky break to start with and took a gamble. And I will consider, well, I'm going to be moving more towards the Leicester defence, and also taking into account they've got a good cup fixture in the early part of January, which makes it a much more attractive prospect. I know it's like you don't know if they're going to play, but what it does mean is they're likely to win that game, and you've got a chance for them either playing in the third round or the fourth round. So every day they just look more and more attractive.
Yeah, and I think that to partly, answer again one of the questions we had earlier, normally I think all three of us would probably look to be in the 30-odd space now, or 25 to 30 in transfers. But this is why I don't really mind having less, because the Leicester and Chelsea assets, I mean, it would have taken a very, well, I'm not sure, lucky or very astute manager to pick out a block Leicester defence, to pick out people like Abraham, Mason Mount, or, I can't see anyone would have picked those at the start of the season. So this is why I don't mind using the subs now, because we've actually moved into a really good place and probably got a team, that's ahead of a lot in terms of having that Leicester coverage. Just a couple more points on those. I do think they will keep it going as well. They've, a lot of that squad and staff have been there and done it already a few years ago. They're also playing some of the best football in the league. I think when you look at some of the teams who are doing well, teams like Wolves and Sheffield United, okay, they're doing well, but a lot of their work is through graft, and they have odd good performances. They also have odd bad ones. I haven't seen a bad Leicester performance for a while, and at times I think their football actually is probably the best in the league. They play with such intensity. They've got no European distraction. As you mentioned, Carlo, we'll look at in a minute. They've got a good FA Cup tie, and they're best for all stats, and they've got low ownership. I just think they're the perfect storm.
Yeah, just to add, well, I need to check it. It's not my analysis, but I saw on Twitter earlier, read a piece that says they're actually, in terms of all of the stats, they're ahead of where they were on the title season.
Yeah.
I think the Liverpool and City are a game changer, because I think that Leicester aren't going to go all season sort of losing one game, but the fact is that season they were ridiculous, and they're actually ahead from what I can gather on all fronts on that. So yeah. Get involved.
I think as well, again, the difference is to that season. I'm saying it's from memory, but the main tactics that season were to sit back and hit on the counter. They do, hit on the counter now, but they've also got a very good pressing game, a very good offensive game. I just think they're all round. I'm a Spurs fan, and while it was nice to watched them yesterday, I've been watching Leicester the last few games. I'd rather watch Leicester than anyone at the moment. I just think they're a joy to watch. Their interplay, in and around the edge of the box is just frightening. It's really, really good. Anyway, I'll get off Leicester. So looking then at the fixtures then. So this is the Fantasy Football Hub fixture ticker available on the website. What we've pulled, so for those again who are listening on audio, we've pulled the stats for the next 7 weeks after this coming weekend. The reason I pulled it for after this coming weekend is because obviously we've got that Liverpool blank, which shows at the bottom. If we look at the teams who have got the best fixtures until game week 24, which I believe is when we hit the fourth round of the FA Cup, right at the top, you've got Bournemouth, you've got Crystal Palace, you've got Villa. You've then also got, in terms of our interest, probably more, you've got Spurs, Chelsea, Man United. The teams in the middle then, you've got teams like Leicester, Norwich, Man City. Leicester's next two after next weekend are Man City and Liverpool. But after that, then they go on a really nice run. And then down the bottom, interestingly, you've got Arsenal, you've got Newcastle, you've got West Ham, but the worst team by quite a distance, actually, and they have the blank, is Liverpool. And I think this is interesting. So if you look at Liverpool's So Liverpool have got Watford next Saturday on the lunchtime game, which then obviously one of the advantages in TFF is we are able to transfer a player out immediately after that game. After that, they've then got Leicester, Wolves, Sheffield United, Tottenham, Man United, and Wolves again. So those two Wolves games are okay. The other four have probably got a probably decent defence now, I would say, and they've also got Everton in the FA Cup, which could obviously it's a cup game. Liverpool could also rest some players there, but I suppose just in terms of what we'll talk about for the remainder of the podcast, which I imagine a lot of it will be around Liverpool players and whether we keep them or not. The fact they're bottom of fixture difficulty, I think, is really, really interesting. And they also have Everton as well. So does anything else jump out there for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. I think that the team at the top, Bournemouth, I would not even regard their fixtures as easy because they've basically got pretty much all of their first 11 are out injured.
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
So I wouldn't touch them. In fact, actually, just a couple of points. So the Villa guys, I mean, Jack Grealish, I think I wouldn't. He's probably the only one I would really want to look at from a Villa perspective. Maybe a defender, but Grealish looks on fire at the moment. Scored again today. But then when it comes to the Liverpool one, I don't actually really care what fixtures they've got. They are head and shoulders above everybody apart from arguably Man City. I mean, the Leicester one could be an interesting one. But given that they play on the Sunday, so it's only Man City, Arsenal, and Arsenal versus Chelsea, Liverpool, Wolves, and City, Sheffield United on that Sunday. But loads of teams are playing. So, if you were looking at hopping on another Leicester player or hopping on the Spurs guys, you can easily hop back on to them on that Wolves fixture. Yeah. And I think Spurs, I mean, we've seen it since Mourinho's come in, they are conceding. Man United aren't the best defensively. So I think if you're looking at Liverpool attacking assets, I don't think you've got any worries. Maybe it's a reason to hold off the defensive ones because they've not been as good this season. But then equally, it may be that those harder games, they go a bit more defensive, a bit like they were last season. Yeah. So they might actually start. But I wouldn't put any stock at all in those Liverpool ones. So ship them out, avoid the Leicester game, and then you're going to get at least a 2 or a 3 or a 4 for 1 for the players coming back in for that Wolves game.
Okay. How about you, Carl? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm quite similar to Luke about the ones at the top. I would probably end up steering a bit clear because even though they've got relatively easy fixtures, so they've got kind of fixtures that they haven't got the top class players that you really want to use transfers on. Mm-hmm. If I was going to take a punt on anybody, it may be Palace and a defender, goalkeeper. Well, I wouldn't even go for the goalkeeper, to be honest, because even though they got a fairly decent FA Cup draw, which sort of comes at the tail end of these fixtures, I think they rotated their keepers last year. So, yes, defensively, they're very tight. So you could bring in a Palace defender. The slight problem is most of them are injured at the moment. I will personally, I'll be steering clear of the bottom few teams. Yes, I understand what Luke says, and I agree with him that I wouldn't overly worry about Liverpool's fixtures because they are that good at the moment. But they're still their most difficult runs that they'll have during the season. So you'd expect them to score less against those ones. So you still expect them to score, but not as many as if they had the easy fixtures. Yeah. So if you're jumping off like I am, I'm seeing that I'm less inclined to jump on for a very short period of time. Yes, you could jump on and get lucky and score a lot of points, but I'm going to steer clear. And I'm just keeping on Leicester because they're on top form. So none of this makes me feel like I was going to jump ship. Spurs, I'm still debating about what's going to happen going forward. I know they've had a change of manager, but they had some good results, but they had a poor result the other day. So jury's still out for me.
Okay, so if we actually look then at what kind of players, so we've looked at the fixtures now that teams have got. at a high level. Luke's actually done some analysis which is really interesting, which says, around the time of year, which kind of players we should be looking at. Luke, do you want to?
Yeah, no, thanks. So this is a bit of a plug for an article I did pre-season, which told everybody to invest in defenders. So that's gone really well, unless they were left at Leicester ones. But I think everybody's off that bandwagon now. Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things, and so the first thing to note is just along the bottom, round group. A round group is a collection of 5 game weeks. So going into round group 4 is basically 16 on to 20 rounds, which is sort of exactly where we are now. And having looked at the last 5 seasons worth of data, there is only one season where this trend wasn't consistent. And so what we're actually seeing is that the start of the seasons, it's a bit tighter, you see a bit more clean sheets. And I guess this makes sense because you start getting into the Christmas period, it gets a bit busier. So you would probably imagine that defenders are going to be a bit more tired, people are switching off a bit. Some of them are going to be thinking about Christmas. No, I don't want dad coming, but they're going to have it anyway. But and as a result, it seems that you get a lot more goals. And so the forwards, and this is worth noting, the forwards from the premium clubs really rank up their points scoring. So they go from an average of just below 5 points a game to an average of almost 6 points a game. So over those 5 weeks, that's basically an extra goal for each of those forwards in those top 6 clubs. The other thing to note is this data only includes those forwards that were playing over 60% of the minutes. So they had to play 60 minutes or more in the games. So we're not looking at the substitutes; they would be removed. So you're looking at the likes of, well, this season you'd be your Kanes, your Rashfords, your Tammy Abrahams, I mean Aguero or Jesus, whichever one's fit. Yeah. And I am going to be back in this, and this is why I talked about it earlier. I've started shifting out my defenders, so I was on 4-4-2 earlier in the season. I was on 5-5-3-2 as well at one point. I am going to be moving either, as I am at the moment, with 5 in midfield or to 3 up top, so 4-3 up top. But and the reason, and sort of people like Sterling, I would classify as forwards. So Mane and Sterling, I absolutely see them as forwards as well. But yeah, I will absolutely be lumping on as many premium forwards as I can for this Christmas period. And as you can see, it sort of goes on for a fairly long bit. So the next sort of 10, 15 game weeks is where, your attacking players sort of hit their form. And then the last 2, the last sort of 10 or so, teams get a lot tighter because there's a lot more on the line, is my theory for that. So yeah, my advice based on previous seasons would be start investing in further forward in your team. Don't just stick it all at the back.
Yeah, I agree with that. And part of the reasons, so I've gone 5 at the back recently, but I did it with a bit of thought in mind in terms of I was always planning to take out Robertson for this the period over Christmas, and maybe then go 4-3-3. So I've got some money in the bank, and this was part of the move of moving to a cheaper defence. I've brought in both Chilwell and Soyuncu in the last week or so, but it wasn't to load up at the back as such. It was to maximise the fixtures of this last week or so, but then move a bit less money into defence and allow me to take Robertson out then and upgrade. We've got, kind of lots of options at the moment. I've got Vardy and Abraham, but I could go to Rashford, you go to Kane, you go to Heung-min Son. There's all these players you can move to. So I'll be doing the same thing. I'll be moving away from Robertson for a few weeks and jumping on these strikers as well. But it's great to see that the data actually backs that up over Christmas as well. So thanks for that, Luke. Carl, have you got any thoughts on that at all?
No, it's really interesting graph, and it really does bring out the value of going on to strikers. Yeah. So fortunately, I've been planning to go to 3 anyway. So that's a bit of comfort there. One thing that does strike me is sometimes when I first saw this, it's like, what really drives it? What's the story behind it? So obviously it's around the Christmas period. And is it because I'm not saying it is. I don't know if there's any analysis on this, Luke, but it all makes sense that defenders get tired. And is it because if the top teams rotate, and if every team rotates a little bit, you actually reserve players for your smaller teams are less good, and your top teams, when you rotate, the quality is so much better than your rotation. And are these the same players that are, at the beginning of the season? So do your strikers get rotated more during this period, or is it no different than before?
I don't know. Just something that occurred to me. So I haven't sent Andrew the slide when we look at everybody but the top six, but the line is basically flat for those ones. So I think that again, as much as the fixture congestion probably adds to it, I think you're probably right, is the depth in the squads, and the top six have, pretty much a like for like replacement or very similar in every position. I mean, even if you take someone like Chelsea, they've got Batshuayi and they've got Giroud. Both of them are decent strikers. They'd get in any outside the top six. They'd arguably be the first choice striker at any of the other clubs. And I think if they are then going up against, I guess, the third or the fourth choice centre back, they're going to have a lot of joy for, a Brighton or a Bournemouth, and Bournemouth are probably down to the fifth or sixth choice at the moment. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I don't know exactly what drives it, but I think that you could probably take a decent stab, and I think you have there.
Yeah, and it is really useful, because what's so fantastic about this is put it in your memory banks for not only your transfers this year, but future planning for seasons to come. Because I half start thinking about the January and nice juicy FA Cup ties, as I always keep on droning on about. But this sort of says get on there early, get those strikers early, and get your Christmas bonus at the same time. So it's absolutely brilliant analysis, and that's very useful. Thanks, Luke.
It is. So now we know which kind of teams have got good fixtures and not, and now we know where maybe we should be looking to spend our money over Christmas. We can now start to look a bit more into detail at the actual calendar of fixtures itself. Again, for our audio listeners, we'll do our best to walk through this in such a fashion that it all makes sense. Basically, we've got a graphic up of all the fixtures. This is the week from the 14th of December through to 22nd, and it shows every fixture for every game day, and that most prevalent one, which we've all been talking about. I think we've been talking about it since our podcast in September, but 14th of December at 12:30 is kind of D-Day in terms of when that deadline passes. I know Carl's a big advocate of this. Luke, maybe not as much. I wasn't, but but looking at the fixtures, I'm starting to lean more towards it now. Actually, do we get rid of our Liverpool players? So once they play, teams like Chelsea, Man City, Spurs, all have 5 fixtures to Liverpool's 2. And Liverpool's next 2 fixtures after that would be Leicester, which obviously, you'd imagine would be a difficult game. In terms of how that game would go, I think it would be very tight. I can't see it being like, a 2-2 or a 3-3 personally. I think it could be a 1-0 or a 1-1 potentially. I think both teams are not, won't want to lose and give Man City any chance to sneak in there. But looking at some of the other teams, so immediate after that after that Liverpool game, Leicester play a couple of hours later. They're home to Norwich, which is probably the best fixture of the season. Sheffield United, if we're looking at defenders, they play Villa immediately, and then they've got Bournemouth. Tottenham play Wolves on the Sunday after that. Chelsea have Bournemouth at 3:00. You couldn't really ask for a better fixture at the moment, because they are dreadful. They're probably worse than Norwich at the moment. If you're thinking about it, so if you don't have Abraham, if you don't have potentially Pulisic, even though he's been a bit of a disaster this last month, don't have Mount, don't have defenders potentially. Arsenal run into Man City, which is probably not the best one. But as we look through these fixtures, guys, looking at that now, you can actually kind of see it in the flesh. Is there anything immediately jumping out of you in terms of when we take out the Liverpool players, who we should be jumping on?
I mean, I'll jump in then. I mean, I've already penciled in Mane to Rashford as my most likely move.
Okay.
That was until yesterday's game where Harry Kane reminded us that he's actually a very bloody good player.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think and it's more down to those forward slots are so precious, and I think you've got Son and Kane up there for Spurs, but Rashford, I think the reason I don't like Martial at all. He's never been a player who's performed ever in any format when I've owned him, and then he gets injured as well. So I think Rashford to get some of that United coverage, because they seem to be getting a good run and decent fixtures, and then free up one of those midfield slots. And if you want to go for one of the others, I would say you've got KDB or Sterling or Ali and people like that. So I think that's kind of where I'm going. But yeah, Mane to Rashford is the one that I've penciled in.
So Rashford would have Everton on the next day, and then Watford, and I think they've got a few other nice matches as well. I suppose the only advantage of going for Martial over Rashford is Martial is 4.8 million, which is quite cheap for a play-in striker, I suppose, in a top 6 team, which I suppose we can start to call them now. And also he's classed as a midfielder, so you could actually then potentially use your, alongside Vardy and Abraham, you could have Kane and Martial. But just to touch on Rashford, I can be quite sensationalist at times over players. I do get a bit excited, but from what I've seen of Rashford over the last 2 or 3 games, I mean, he just looks absolutely phenomenal. I think he's reminded me of when Cristiano Ronaldo was at Man United, how he strikes the ball, how dangerous he is. He reminds me of Sterling last year, of how every time he gets the ball and runs the defence, you just absolutely think, oh my God, I don't own him. He just looks, and the way he strikes the ball, I mean, that he hit the bar against Spurs in midweek. I don't know if either of you saw that. He hit the ball it must have been nearly 30 yards out. The keeper was nowhere, and he hit the bar again yesterday. He should have scored another yesterday easily. He just looks in frightening form.
The only sort of note for him. I mean, I think comparing to Ronaldo, you probably are going a little bit too.
Of how he was at Man United, I meant.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one doubt I've got is that there's rumours that Pogba's only a few weeks away from being fit again. And I think United have hit a bit of a groove now, and they're in a bit of momentum. And there's 2 things that Pogba coming back will do. Pogba's a bit more greedy, but he is very good. So in theory, he should replace the I don't know whatever age is 17-year-old Jesse Lingard, and provide a bit more creativity. But I mean, you don't have to think back too far to that penalty debacle where both of them, Pogba and Rashford, were alternating and missing because they had the pressure of the other. Yeah. If Pogba does come back sooner rather than later, I might have a second think on it and wait and see if he's still got pens, because I think Pogba is not the best influence on the team, despite how good a player he is.
Just to clarify my Ronaldo point, I meant when he was at Man United and not the 500 goals wherever he scored at Real Madrid, but he does look very Ronaldo-esque to me of how he was a few years ago. Carl, have you got any thoughts? Just looking at that kind of week of fixtures there. Obviously, a lot of players have got a couple of games to Liverpool's none. Is there anything on there that entices you other than Rashford, I suppose?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say, Andrew, is this is a fantastic tool. When you look at it, you can quickly see places where you can make transfers and options that you have ahead of you. And anybody who hasn't seen it, look in the link that Andrew, I think, said that he'd provide.
Yeah.
And have a look, because it is really, really valuable, and everything. It gives so much clarity to what's going on. And that's the first thing I like to say. Second thing I like to sort of say is, even though you may see juicy juicy teams or transfers to make. Just remember, transfers aren't just for Christmas; they're for the season.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So, because you can easily get caught up and going, oh, we got 2 or 3 good fixtures, spend a transfer on it, and then you have to then use another transfer, and they'll quickly go by the wayside. But this, the help planning to keep your team on the straight and narrow, prepared for the season, is fantastic. In terms of, well, as I've already mentioned, I've got 2 Liverpool players to get rid of. So that the 2 defenders, one of them was, like I said, was going to be for Rashford or Jesus, and the other one for Leicester defender. But my other option, which I haven't decided on, is Maguire. So he's a bit of a problem. I don't really want him in my team. So I had thought of an option of finessing him back to a Liverpool player. So I'd get the extra fixtures and I'd get back on the Liverpool team when they come back from their blank. But as we've sort of talked about, that seems I'm moving away from that idea. So it's then how to use that next transfer, and I'll be looking at this guide to determine. I'll be looking at the top teams, to be honest, because with more and more Leicester players, I don't want to be looking at the Bournemouth, the Villas. You may have great value, but you don't have too much money in the bank. I'll be looking at your Spurs players, your Man United attackers. Though, if whichever striker I go for, I've got my lot of 3. But which then is the next best midfielder? Is it Spurs, Man City, or whoever? So I will be using this, but no, I'm still undecided. There's so many juicy opportunities.
Yeah, there are. Looking at the next one then, so this next one covers from Boxing Day through to the 29th, when again a lot of teams have got 2 games. It does show Liverpool's game against Leicester. Interesting thing about Liverpool's game against Leicester and actually their game against Wolves is this actually the final game of the game weeks as well. So if you did want to get Liverpool players back, you are getting the extra games out of their replacement, which is quite interesting. So this clearly shows that Liverpool are playing at 8 p.m. on Boxing Day, where every single team, maybe aside from Man City and Wolves, which is earlier, but every team plays before then. They might actually be on the 27th. I wonder if that's an error in there. But anyway, this goes up to the 29th. And then interestingly then, we start looking at the FA Cup. And just, I suppose, an interesting point you mentioned, Maguire there, Carl, is Man United are probably only one of 4 teams who've got, I would say, quite a difficult FA Cup game where they face a real risk of going out. Obviously, they have Wolves. So that could be a factor as well, potentially, with teams like Leicester having Wigan, Man City have got Port Vale, Sheffield United have got Filled, which for my sins I've never even heard of. Brighton have got Sheffield Wednesday, Chelsea have got Notts Forest. They all play prior to that Wolves game. Odds are probably a lot of them will get rested, but there's also that risk and reward thing that if some of them do actually play, they could be well in the points there as well. So just another thing to think about if you're thinking about getting rid of Man United players. And the standout one there for me is the 5th of January. So Liverpool play Everton in the FA Cup at 4 p.m. Again, this is after all the other games have been played. So, and you also get to see the lineups for all of them as well. So it could be, and this is probably what I'll be looking at personally, is getting Liverpool players back potentially for the FA Cup game. We get to look at the lineups for those games. Everyone else will have already played, so who's going to be knocked out. If there's any FA Cup shocks, if Man United get knocked out, if Wolves get knocked out, if you're holding on to Rashford, Maguire, Jimenez, someone like that, you have got that option then of jumping in quite early. So I think that's my preference, potentially get Liverpool players back. Liverpool do actually, I think they play Tottenham after this match as well. So you could even wait further on, as the fixture ticker indicated earlier. But that's my kind of plan. So in terms of my specific transfers, I'm still slightly undecided on who to go for. I've got Alexander-Arnold, Liverpool. I've got Alexander-Arnold, Robertson, and Mane. I will definitely be getting rid of Robertson and Mane due to their price point. So Alexander-Arnold is only 4.5. So I'll probably hold on to him. I don't really want to use 6 transfers to take them out and put them back in again. But I do think 4 transfers, potentially. The ones I'm thinking about are Rashford, maybe Ali, maybe Son, Sterling, or De Bruyne. They're the ones I've kind of got in my mind at the moment. And they've all got really nice fixtures. Ali at 4.8 for me is, he's a midfielder, so he doesn't fill that striker spot. He's reminded me of how he played, was it 3 seasons ago, when he went on that crazy run over Christmas when he scored, I'm sure he scored 3 braces on the trot or something ridiculous like that. He's basically playing as a striker. He's scoring points every single week. And if we just flick back briefly to look at Spurs' run, so Spurs on the 15th play Wolves, so maybe not the best time there, but they do play on the 22nd at 4:30. So they'll have played. All the other teams will have played by then on that game week. So they have Chelsea at home. Chelsea not the best defensively. And then after that, then they have the first game on Boxing Day, which is home to Brighton. So obviously you get 2 games there over everyone else because they have the last game of the previous week and the first game of this week. Then they play Norwich. Then they play Southampton. Then they've got Middlesbrough in the FA Cup, albeit that is on the second game day of the FA Cup one. But that's a marvellous run to potentially bring in Ali, maybe even Son, maybe even Kane for, Mane and Robertson. Because in that time, Liverpool will only have had Leicester, Wolves and Sheffield United. So I do think that's a potential profitable move there. Any thoughts on the FA Cup games, guys? Anything stand out? Any potential opportunities or anything like that? Anyone?
Yeah, go on then. Go on, Carl. Just being polite again, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, to me, I was a little bit disappointed with the TV fixtures. For some reason, I thought they were spread out a lot more different times. I thought there was a Friday night game. I thought there's like loads of different times on the Sunday and on the Saturday. So I don't know if there's any more changes to come. But it seems they're all focused on this, the Saturday at 3 o'clock. But there are some really, really juicy fixtures in there, and we've already talked about Leicester. Leicester at home to Wigan. And I'm not sort of saying, quite likely there'll be rotation. And I know Vardy's been rotated out in the past. But if you're lucky and they play them, you could be looking forward to a nice windfall. Man City, historically, Pepper's played quite a lot of his top players, even against minnows, so you may get lucky again. So the points could rain in, and I understand like the Liverpool-Everton game's a big game, but that would make me think that Liverpool will play a strong team. So I remember last year when they played away at Wolves, I didn't recognise any of their players. So it wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't sort of like think, I'm going to get Mane back in and they've got a good game in the Cup. It wouldn't surprise me if you played a bunch of kids, if they're still in the Champions League, and we'll find that out this week, and they're still, looking for the league title. I don't think he'll care about the FA Cup. But if you got a transfer ready to go onto Mane on that day, then that's fine because you'll see the lineup beforehand. But I wouldn't think about bringing in Mane beforehand because I can imagine no Liverpool first team is playing in that match, despite it being a local derby.
Yeah, I think potentially, conversely, for Leicester, who haven't got any Europe, I think Leicester would think as well. I think even when Leicester in the year they won the league, I'm not sure they actually believed at Christmas they could win the league. I think that will have given them now, a real boost to know that where they are now, that maybe they can't catch Liverpool, right? But in terms of what they could do, they could potentially win the FA Cup. They're good enough easily to win the FA Cup, Leicester. And I do wonder whether, because they haven't got Europe, they haven't got as many games as some of the other big teams, I do wonder whether Leicester may actually have a go on the fourth and play, and play a good team out.
I agree. Got to remember, as far as I remember, Leicester's still in the League Cup and have played quite strong teams in that.
Yeah.
I don't know what Brendan Rodgers, like, even though they may because they play Man City soon and they're playing Liverpool soon. It depends. They may not be able to win the league, but I'm sure they want to make sure they get top four. Yeah. So whether they go for the league or top four, I think that'd be paramount to them. I don't know how many players will get rested, and they'll go, well, if we lose, so be it. We concentrate on the league and the rest of the players. It is the FA Cup roulette, but you'd expect them to win. And if you've got all the defenders, surely a couple of them play. Yeah,
exactly. I think you have got is it Fuchs and Justin and maybe Wes Morgan, who can come in, but I don't think they'll want to risk it either. If you've got two or three of the defenders, odds are at least one of them will play. So
I think he'll rotate a little bit, but not full 11. But what about you, Luke?
So I've looked at it, and I think I've mentioned it on the previous ones. I mean, I don't really put much stock in the third round for the Prem teams, because all the years I've been playing this game, I can't really remember many games where anybody plays any of their full strength teams. You probably have to go back to the 70s where people did that these days, but showing my age now. But there's 4 fixtures that I think there's reasons why you might be optimistic. The number 1 fixture isn't the Liverpool-Everton one; it's actually the Spurs fixture. And the reason for that, so Mourinho, he's a serial winner. He goes in and he wants to install that winning mentality. So that's the one. Now, you might see Kane rested and Son up top. You might see Son rested and, I don't know, Lucas Moura coming in. And they've got a decent squad. But I still think Spurs will be playing most of they'll probably play 6 or 7 of their first team. The other fixtures then, there's 3 other teams that I think you've got a chance their players playing. So Everton, they've got a derby, and they've just been humiliated by Liverpool. I think they're going to want to come back from that. Liverpool, now you've seen that he is prepared to rest people in the derby, which I don't know what that tells you more about Liverpool or Everton. Actually, it's a bit concerning. Actually, if you're an Everton fan, I've got a few mates who are. But either of those they could, because there's stuff on the line there. There's bragging rights, and particularly over that New Year period. And then the final one that I picked out. So I don't think Wolves will play a full strength team, because they've got the UEFA Cup that they're going for, and they're going all right in the league, and they've got a decent chance of pushing into Europa League, not but they've got a decent chance of making that just through the Premier League. However, Man United, I think if the current form continues, they've got so much history in it that I don't think their fans will really allow them to not play a half-decent team. So I think my picks of that, if I had to pick a team, it would be Spurs, but it's probably Spurs, then United, and then Everton or Poole is probably a joint third.
No, I agree with your point there, Luke, and you make some very good, strong cases on all of that. The one thing that I would say is that, unfortunately for me, most of those matches you mentioned are the later games. So, like Liverpool's on the 5th of January, which I think is a Sunday. Same with Spurs, and Man United's the late kickoff. So I think there's only about 2 or 3 weeks before the following round. So it's quite nice to have, if your team wins, that, assuming there's nothing else happens, that they're at least in the chance of picking up some points in the 4th round. Whereas if you're sort of gambling on Man U at Wolves, even though I'd expect Man U to win that, there's a chance they don't, and it then means you have to start making a transfer. Whereas if you've got, say, the Leicester match, and Leicester for some reason get knocked out, you can at least move a couple of their players onto the fixtures that you mentioned. So you'll have the Man United game come in, and then you can go, yeah, I'll bring in Rashford, or I'll bring in their midfielders, because you don't want to miss 2 or 3 blank game weeks, which would occur if your team's got knocked out. Whereas if that happened to Man U, you've got less opportunity of getting that extra fixture in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, I think that, I was sort of ranking them with that light on it as well. I mean, Spurs versus Middlesbrough seems a bit of a no-brainer that you've got a decent chance. So, Dele Alli, when's he coming in?
Yeah, I think, and this is why I really like talking with you guys, is I love listening and being on podcasts where I feel I'm learning something. And I think that you've just, I think, confirmed my thoughts on, I'm not going to go for Rashford, and I'm probably not going to bring in the Liverpool players earlier, because they both have a reasonable chance of getting knocked out in the 3rd round, which means they would have a blank game week 3 weeks later, when all the other, well, not all, obviously, there may be some surprises, but it does mean that I think it's end of January is the 4th round of the FA Cup. And obviously on that weekend, the Premiership teams, only the 3rd round teams that are completely knocked out to tend to play each other where the ties meet. But generally, a lot of Premier League teams do have a break then. So I think where I was tossing up potentially between, let's say, Rashford and Son, I think that would make me now heavily lean more towards Son. And whereas potentially maybe thinking of bringing Mane in early, just as an example, for potentially Sterling, I think I may hold on to Sterling. But that's just a thought I've had in this minute.
No, it's an interesting one. I mean, just I guess one things, and it's one of my key rules for the Telegraph game is, once a club, I mean, particularly if they're not a top 6 club or top 4 club, have been knocked out, they pretty much become irrelevant to me in Telegraph, because that I've won, I think, well, probably out of the 20 years or so I've been playing, I've probably cashed certainly in my mini leagues because of the FA Cup final. And I know this year it wasn't the last game of the season, but so many people above you will have forgotten about that. And I know, like, this year that's just gone, I mean, I think in one of my mini leagues I went from 10th up to, I think I finished 5th in it, so I only just got my money back. But all the same, it was, I think I had 7 City players. I think it was this year, but and that's a consistent thing, is that I will focus on those teams that have the best chance of being in the final.
And I think as well, we may be, I think we were spoilt last year in TFF, in that the title race was so close, and also Man City were in the FA Cup final. So Man City had to play their best team every single week. They played their, from game week 30 odd onwards, they played, Aguero, Sterling, they played every single game non-stop. If Liverpool do walk this league, and they've won it by, say, April, or even, as at the moment, potentially even end of March, early April is not completely out of the question, then that raises real questions later on around, if Liverpool are still in the Champions League, and Liverpool is still in the FA Cup, they may actually start resting their players during those end league games. And similarly, Man City, for example, if they have lost the league, but they're guaranteed the top 4, I think this is a real difference to last year, and really worth thinking about holding some transfers back. You don't want to be loading up on loads of Liverpool and Man City players just for them to get rotated at the end of the season, especially if they're knocked out of the cup as well. And that's, as you say, Luke, that's a really interesting point there. Last year, one of my biggest rank swings, so I went from, I think it was 1,400 to 400 in 2 weeks, was Liverpool got knocked out of the FA Cup by Wolves. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times before, but it's worth mentioning now because it's very relevant. And immediately, you noticed then that Liverpool didn't have a game in the 4th round. Man City had already won, so they had 4 or 5 games to Liverpool's 1 or 2. And so I jumped on all the Man City players there. And that gave me a massive swing over 2 weeks. So I do think this third round, this Liverpool-Everton game, potentially Man United-Wolves, are very, very important in how, you know, the rest of the season plays out. If Liverpool get knocked out, I think it was Everton, which is not beyond, all realms of reasonableness. I think it does actually, define a bit of a route potentially of where you go forwards. Have you got thoughts on that, Carl? I think Luke maybe agree with that. How about you, Carl?
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, I wouldn't overload on any one team that are playing in the later games.
No.
But you'll always have a chance to transfer them out.
Yeah.
The one bit I'd just wish to add into the mix, and this isn't something I'm thinking about deeply, but it's to be aware, is future fixtures after the third round. So not only have you got the fourth round at the end of January that we've sort of talked about, this year I think it's coming, they're in a split game week in mid-February, which within itself, that doesn't alter any of my plans, but I think as a consequence of that, the FA Cup fifth round is a midweek.
Okay.
And I think if I got my dates right, I think it's the midweek after the League Cup final. So I'm not taking any thoughts about it now, but when we move over December and we have the quarterfinals, and you move into January when I presume we have the semi-finals, teams, if they make the League Cup final, not only will they have to blank, I'd imagine that they may rest players if they're still in the FA Cup. So there's all sorts of issues that are just bubbling under the surface to be aware of, even if you're not going to bring it into your plans at this moment in time.
Yeah, and this is why you mentioned it earlier, Carl. This planner here, this tool, is something. It's my, I've been using it for years. It's my absolute Bible during December, January, and February, because a lot of things get rearranged. You've already mentioned about the fourth round. You've also mentioned about that split game week. There's the potential for games to be moved around due to the League Cup final. We also haven't even mentioned any third round replays yet, which will obviously all be added into the mix. They're usually the midweek after. So these games are being played on the 4th, 5th and 6th of January. If there are replays for the third and fourth round, they are generally, so they'll be played roughly like the 10th or 11th. So Liverpool, Everton are a draw. They get that, they get that extra fixture, but it also causes more disruption. So it's really interesting that to really keep an eye on the fixtures, because this is probably where the players who pay more attention to the fixtures and their movement tend to get an edge on the ones, the ones who don't.
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing we sort of half mentioned, but we haven't mentioned the other half, is naturally Liverpool got a blank, but they'll play that fixture at some stage, and it's like worth keeping your ear to the ground of how soon or how late that may be.
Yeah.
And therefore you may want to jump in or not, and it's just follow your fixture guide, because all the information's on there, and assuming that as soon as things are announced, that gets updated, then that's everything you need to know.
Cool. Okay. Have we got anything else, guys, on fixtures? I think we've talked a lot about them. I think I'm hoping we've given a lot of ideas to people about how to navigate through the Christmas period and FA Cup, and some thoughts. So to summarize for me, what I'll be mainly thinking about. So I've got Alexander-Arnold, Robertson and Mane. I'll be getting rid of Robertson and Mane, probably for like to say either a Man City player, Spurs player, potentially Rashford, though as we mentioned earlier, we've talked off that due to Liverpool's fixtures not being good then, until potentially the end of January. I would then very, very roughly, obviously, this could change. I would probably looking to get back on Liverpool then personally towards the middle to end of January, depending on how the fixtures fall. I suppose that's me in summary. I'll be looking to keep my Leicester players in. I think they've got really good fixtures for a long time yet. Okay, they've got City and Liverpool after Norwich, but I can't see any reason why they can't score goals, especially against City, who are dreadful at the back. And I'll be leaving my Leicester players in. Chelsea have got really good fixtures for a long time as well, so I'm hoping Abraham and Pulisic continue to kind of do it. So that's my plan roughly for December and January. Carl, are you able to summarise your plans next month or so?
Well, I'm probably the most boring out of the three of us. Yeah, my plan is to get rid of my 2 Liverpool, bring in a Leicester defender, and even though I'm a little bit not anti-Rashford, I've sort of talked down Rashford because of them being a difficult and late FA Cup game. I haven't ruled him out, and it's a toss-up between Rashford and Jesus, and the reason of that is because I don't know about Aguero, and I have to sort of keep on track of, is he coming back? And I don't want to go on to Jesus, only to have to transfer him out again. So it's between either of those 2. And then my third transfer would be Maguire out, and I just haven't decided where he's going to go yet. But it'll be to a top club and one of the premium midfielders. And that fits in lovely with Luke's analysis, which I appreciate, and that makes it so much easier for me.
Yep. And how about yourself, Luke? What is your master plan for next month?
So not to burn through transfers, but probably be
probably
number one.
Yeah.
No, so I think I mentioned it. So I'll be going Mane to Rashford. That's happening, and then I'm looking for an excuse to bring in Ali, and that will probably be for. I mean, I don't think I can do it with the Dan James, but probably for. For the Wolves, so when Liverpool then play Wolves again, then I'll be bringing Mane back in for that game. So those are the 3. I don't think I'll be using any more. So it'll probably leave me with 1 City. So Rashford in for Mane, and then Mane coming in for one of the City boys, and then probably Pulisic will make way for Ali. I think will be my route.
Okay, cool. Okay, so as we move on then, so we look at Player Picks Challenge. So this is the last thing we're going to do on the podcast. So over the last 2 months, we have picked 3 players each. We've picked a premium player, so someone over 5 million. We have picked a medium value player between 3 and 5 million, and we've all picked a low value player, so an enabler, under 3 million. For October, Luke stole a march on us. The scores for November, so Carl picked Soyuncu, who has scored 17 in the last 2 game weeks, Abraham 14 and Salah 12. So well done, Carl, you scored 43. Luke, you picked Tomori, who just managed the 3 points. Van Aanholt scored 12 before pulling his hamstring on the weekend, which is obviously a real shame. Vardy absolutely smashing it for you with 35 points, including his 12 points this afternoon. And I went for Carl's algorithm pick, Emerson, which has backfired a little bit with Chelsea not being so reliable at the back. Pulisic has disappointed me so much. He's got 8 points in his last 4 games, which is 2 points a game. He hasn't even managed a second KC, which makes me sick. And the fact that Van Aanholt, who we all kind of scoffed a little bit at, Luke's pick, has scored more than Pulisic, is just I'm going
to add to that Schlupp came on from him and scored, so he would have got a goal and a clean sheet, he would have got another clean sheet yesterday. That
was a good pick. Well, you'd be a little bit lucky there. I did pick Mane up, which was a nice one, so he had 22 points, but I only landed on 33. I was listening back to our earlier podcast earlier today for some inspiration, and we were all laughing actually at Danny Ings. I picked him out as a potential differential in the last pod, and we were laughing at him, but he scored in every game week so far. So if we'd have picked him, we'd be sitting on he'd have about 28 points now, which would be just behind Vardy. So it would have been a great pick, but never mind there. And in total so far, so Luke, you're leading the charge. You've got 114 points in total. Carl's got 89, and I'm lagging behind on 84. But I do
Just
get
a quick question: Do you
Yes,
want
go on.
me to play next month, or do you want me to just sit it out for you boys to catch up?
Well, we'll see, because you swine. I have got first pick this month, so I've got a chance to get back into it a little bit. Just before I do pick, we did pick out a TFF community player to play against us now for this next month. So Richard Brooks has played against us. So we'll pick someone every month to come up against us. He's picked his 3, and the 3 players that he has picked. So he officially gets first pick. He has picked one of my first picks, which I'm gutted about. But he's picked Rashford for his premium. He has picked Dele Alli for his mid-price one, which would have been my pick at just 4.8 million. And he's picked Kelly for Palace as his enabler. So we'll do this every month, and we will see how the TFF community performs against us. I'll go first this time. So my premium player, to play it safe and play Vardy. I mean, it's a bit boring, but he just looks unstoppable at the moment, and their fixtures are still nice for quite a long time. Our next podcast probably won't be until the middle of January, so it's a good probably 6 or 7 games as well. So I'm gonna have to go Vardy. Apologies for the boring pick for that. I would have gone Ali for the mid-priced one, but I am going to go for Abraham. I do think that Chelsea still have got nice fixtures, so I'm going for Vardy and I'm going for Abraham. And for my enabler, I was just gutted that Chilwell's 3.1. He's just outside. I know it's boring, but Soyuncu is probably the only one who sticks out for me there. So I'm going to go for Soyuncu. I need to claw back some points, so I'm going to go steady and stable. So they're going to be my 3 picks for the next few weeks. Luke, you're second this time.
It was a close one. So Kane or Rashford. I think I'll go Kane.
That's a good shout.
My premium. Eggs in one basket here. I'll have Dele Alli as well. Yeah, go on.
You can't have him as well. You can't have him as well. That's the thing. So our community champ, because we can't. We all have to have different picks.
Oh, as a community champ, got Dele Alli.
He's got Dele Alli. Okay.
Sorry. No, right, in which case I'll have Pereira.
Yeah, good show.
So can you remind me what the community sub pick was?
Kelly.
That's an interesting one. Right. Evans or Stevens? Ooh. I'll go Johnny Evans.
Good shout. Okay, and Carl, you're left with the dregs, even though they're not dregs actually, because there's still 3 there. I can think of really easy who I'd like to pick, but you're going for.
Well, I like the way Luke Campbell's up with 2 lesser defenders.
Yeah.
On the premium, so I didn't catch everybody's. Is Kane still available?
No, Luke had Kane.
Vardy?
Gone.
Rashford?
Gone.
Oh my God.
It's all right, you can have a Aubameyang. He's been on fine form.
Ings?
He's
too cheap.
He's too cheap, that's the problem. Okay, I'll come back to that.
Okay.
For the cheap one, I'm going to gamble up and go for Trossard.
Okay, that's a good show. Yeah.
For the middle one, I think I'm okay with Chilwell.
Yeah.
And so Kane's gone, Vardy's gone, and Rashford's gone.
Son's still available.
Son, yeah.
Yeah. Really.
KDB, Sterling.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of that. Liverpool, no. I'll go for Sterling, see if he gets his shooting boots back on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go for Sterling and catch you boys up. He'll bang a hat-trick.
Cool. Okay, then. Okay, so that's it, everyone. We hope you enjoyed. As usual, Any feedback or any ideas on how we can improve are most welcome. On Twitter, I'm at Fergie222. Please feel free at any time to ask me anything. And if you can share and retweet the podcast when we put it out, so it'll be going out on YouTube and everything else. This will be going out on YouTube on the Fantasy Football Hub channel. I'll put the link up on Twitter, and the audio podcast is available on all major podcast libraries, including iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let's get the word out. Let's get people playing TFF, enjoying TFF for what it is. Fantasy Football Hub are at ffootballhub on Twitter. Their website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk. And we are everything you need under one roof for everything fantasy football. We now produce a weekly article, as I mentioned earlier, for the Telegraph, which breaks down key stats such as points, form, value, and ownership, and makes recommended transfers for the following weeks. I've done this now for 3 weeks, and I've had some pretty good shouts in there, actually. Players like Baldock, Rashford, Ings, and people like that. So there are some really good picks in there if you're looking. The TFF Planner, which we've been showing off today for anyone watching on YouTube, breaks down all the games by game day to maximise transfers. Currently it's on my website, but I'll be moving this over to Fantasy Football Hub in this week. So please head over there to have a look at that. Carl's algorithm article every week is available, sharing it in detail, the best statistical team for the next 6 weeks. Carl's algorithm is absolutely fantastic. My TFF article, where I discuss my plans and my every move, is for standard hub members. If you're not a member, please use code Andrew10 for a 10% discount. That's Andrew10. And we also have a TFF WhatsApp chat group on premium membership, which is building up nicely as well. Use code Andrew10 for that again for a 10% discount on that. As you can see, Fantasy Football Hub has got you completely covered for everything Telegraph Fantasy Football. You don't need to go anywhere else. We'll look to do our next podcast probably start to middle of January, depending on on all our availability. But it won't be before the FA Cup. It'll be after the FA Cup, maybe the week after that potentially. But I'll speak to the guys and we'll do that then. Thank you so much as usual, guys, for your time and your brilliant wisdom and insight. Luke, where can we find you?
Generally, I'm in that WhatsApp group as well. Do a few articles on the hub. But main contact is on Twitter. So my handle's FBL_equation.
Cool. Thank you very much. And Carl, thanks to you. And where can we find you?
I'm also at the Fantasy Football Hub, and Twitter. My handle is Darkest Jungle.
Cool. So all that remains is for us to wish you the best of luck for the coming weeks. Have a great Christmas and New Year. And most importantly, get lots and lots of TFF points. Thank you very much and goodbye.